still there'll be ties that will stay, for we'll all remember the years we loved and the school our hearts hold dear.
Hello, everybody.
Hello and welcome.
Hello and welcome.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this year's brand new holiday special for the Grand Taro. And that is Tuesday afternoon recorded, of course. Here we go. Let's kick it off. So, essentially, you got pre-COVID and you got COVID.
Right.
And for me, at least, those are both different eras with different Felixes. So for pre-COVID, you got your boy running around, hanging out with people. You know, I'm like talking to teachers, talking to the students, doing what I do. And now I'm just sitting here on my computer all day. So obviously things are going to change. And for me, the habits that have changed the most are, I guess, just like what I do with my mental health. When I actually am doing something about it. Because, you know, there are some times when I'm feeling like not very productive and I just don't do anything about it for a while. But when I do things about it, I guess my biggest change in habit is when I go to sleep. When I actually get a good night's sleep and I like read and then I go to sleep and I like cut down on screen time in the nighttime, I just feel like I'm operating at another level, you know?
Feels good.
Yeah.
Right.
So I want to hear what you guys think. How has your habits changed in this quarantine season?
Gabe, why don't you go ahead?
I'd say probably, I think I have definitely paid more attention to my mental health. I think that's always something that's been on my mind in some way, but like, I think with so much stress going on regarding the pandemic and quarantine and everything, I feel like I have just changed my habits to become like a little bit more aware of that and a little bit more aware of what I need to do in order to stay mentally healthy and to stay just not get down and sad as much as I can. And you know, some sadness is okay and is normal, but just to be like very aware of that, I guess, is something that's changed. I think especially with being in quarantine, it really limits the amount of activities that you can do. So I think I will admit, I feel like I've been spending a lot more time on screens. I think that's really common for a lot of people, but I definitely will admit that since so many different parts of, like school is online and like my social life is online, I've just been looking at a screen so much. And so just like being able to be aware of that also, and then just figuring out ways that I can take breaks and, you know, go on walks and stuff and just find ways to try to minimize that in any way that I can. And then I think that relates to mental health, because I think then I'm able to support my mental health if I'm taking time for myself and I'm stepping away when I can.
Word.
Right. Yeah, I think you made some excellent points. Personally, I've had a lot of my habits change over quarantine, and we're going to talk about this more later in the episode. But part of the reason my habits have changed are because I moved, and that's kind of helped to be able to. So I've been able to change kind of how I do stuff within my house. But for me, when I do work and how I get work done has changed tremendously. Before quarantine happened, I would try to get most of my work done at school, and then I'd come home and I'd do a little bit of work, and then home time would be home time. Now it's that separation between home and school that's really become mushed together. So I've been trying to work recently on getting my work done right after our synchronous classes during that asynchronous time, but it's still hard, and I still find myself working on a lot of work kind of later in the evening. So that's certainly been a change for me.
Mm-hmm. I think it's hard to find motivation. So just being able to find times, I mean, again, it's like that balance of like finding times to be productive so you can like get stuff done, but then also finding time where you just are taking a break is really important.
Right.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you. And yeah, just doing whatever you can to take care of yourself. And for some people, like for me, sometimes I'm like, I need to take care of myself and I need to relax. And then I go and play video games. And I think I'm starting to realize that just like doing that and being on screens even more isn't necessarily the best way to relax. Like over quarantine, I've actually started reading more, like a little bit recently, because usually reading just puts me right to sleep. But I started reading as I went to sleep, so then my body got used to it. Kind of like at first it was okay that I was going to sleep because I wanted to go to sleep, but then I was able to actually read and not go to sleep. So now reading is like a nice relaxing thing for me, And whenever I spend like 3 or 4 hours just reading, I always come out of it and I'm like, wow, that was time well spent, And I'm not thinking I should have been doing homework instead of playing video games. I'm thinking, hey, at least I was reading.
Yeah. I've definitely also I've rediscovered reading. Reading was something I did a lot the end of elementary school and in middle school. And as I grew older, I phased out of it a bit, but I've definitely rediscovered it as a good kind of relaxing tool. And I'm able to read before bed sometimes or just during the day. And I've read been reading some books for school, and instead of kind of skipping around, I've actually been reading the whole book, which I think has been a really healthy thing. So definitely rediscovered that too.
Yeah.
I also think like something that I've found I've kind of like changed. I mean, I feel like I've always been a pretty organized person, but I think being home all the time and having everything be, online and having to do it from home, I'm having to try like be even better and hold myself accountable to like having a schedule and being organized in when I'm going to do what, so that I, because otherwise if I don't do that, I just feel like the day gets away from me. Like school happens and then it's the end of the day. And so keeping that schedule holds me accountable, and then also just allows me to manage my schedule better.
Yeah. All right, you guys. I think that we should wrap this part up. Any last things you want to say?
Also, I've been drinking more water.
Yes.
Really good.
I've been eating more at regular times. So yes.
That is very good. Yes, that too.
Good job,
That's all
both
for
of
me.
you, for
That's all
that.
for me.
I love that for you.
Yes.
Okay. And next up, folks, we'll be back with an epic guest and then some more epic guests. So stick around. Taro will be right back with you. Woo!
Welcome back to Tara. Since our last recording, we have had quite the tumultuous presidential election. At the time of this recording, Joe Biden has won the election, but Trump is still refusing to concede. Here for further discussion is Mr. Renoir, a government history and leadership teacher here at Nathan Hale.
Hey, everybody.
Mr. Renoir, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure to spend time with you, gentlemen. How great is this?
Thank you. So it was really a chaotic election. It was unlike any other, at least that I've seen, and I'm assuming unlike you've seen as well. So before we get to the results, what were your thoughts on the campaign?
This was one of the weirdest campaigns that I've ever seen. You either had this big dichotomy. You've got either these huge super spreader events full of maskless people in enclosed spaces, or Joe Biden on a lawn with 4 people 20 feet away with a mask on. So you had this very different way of approaching. I don't feel like either candidate really campaigned like they would have if we were in non-COVID times. And they didn't go to all the places. President Trump had a much more aggressive campaign, I think. He did go to places where he needed to go. And Mr. Biden did to an extent, but he really depended a lot on remote communication and small group communication and word of mouth communication in a way that was very different than kind of that support of the base that President Trump enjoys so much with the big events. But Mr. Biden didn't. I look back to when President Obama was running in 2008. He filled Seattle Center and filled all the overflow, and then he kept filling into the parking lot, and then people, down the street. It was this giant event, and it was one of thousands of hundreds rather of giant events through the year and a half that he ran. That's what a normal campaign kind of looks like. This campaign was very different. And it really came down to just a couple of big issues. For the Biden campaign, they mostly ran on COVID and what they were characterizing as an incompetent federal response to COVID. President Trump was running on, you don't want a socialist to run the country, which I don't believe Joe Biden or Kamala Harris qualify as. Joe's a fairly moderate Democrat, Kamala more to the left, but not into that, far left arena. So they ran very different campaigns on very different issues. Joe didn't talk. He did talk, and he had papers on it about economy, but that wasn't his big thrust. That wasn't what he led with every time. So that's one big difference. They were talking 2 different campaigns and 2 different foci. So that was one big piece of it. And it was a very different campaign in general, just because the lead up to choosing Biden was so strange. He was losing for the first 5 or 6 primaries. People say, Joe who? And then he ends up doing very, very well and overwhelmingly getting the nomination. So not a lot of normals, I guess, went on here.
Right.
I don't think there's anything else I can add from historically. I don't think the vote was very different but we'll get to that. I think that's a future question here. So I'll stop that question there, and it'll probably come up with it. We'll circle back as we get to other questions.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Right. So it was definitely a crazy election, crazy campaign, but in comparison to other campaigns, like what were the differences and like similarities that you've seen?
One of the things that's always kind of been a hallmark of American campaigns is that one standout moment. I'll give you a couple of examples. I'm zoning on who the vice presidential candidate was, but he was running against Dan Quayle in the vice presidential debate. And Dan Quayle had made a comment that he knew President Kennedy, and he was a lot like President Kennedy. And this man turned to him and said, "Mr. Quayle, I knew President Kennedy. I worked with President Kennedy, and you, sir, are no President Kennedy." Blew him out of the water. He had no response. That was a defining thing that happened. Another example was Ross Perot, Bill Clinton, and George Bush. One of the first few times, actually the first time that a third party candidate was invited to the debates. Back in 1980, a guy named John Anderson, who was a moderate Republican who ran independent, was close to getting on the debates, and what they did is they had him on a split screen answering questions while the actual debate happened. So Ross Perot joining was really, being invited was really important. And Bill Clinton knew that he had one shot to kneecap this guy that was being so popular. So George Bush had given his answer to a question. It was about the economy. And he'd given his answer to the question, and Ross Perot had given his answer. And there was three podiums on a stage. And Bill Clinton did the most masterful thing, defining his whole campaign. He walked out from behind the podium, walked to the edge of the stage, looked a person directly in the eye, and said, "I feel your pain." And he made that connection in a way that no candidate has up to that point. "I feel your pain." With the thumb, that's my Clinton thumb. And it was brilliant. And that defined that election was that. This didn't have that. This had the worst, most chaotic and troubling debate I've ever seen. And I'm really including student debates in this as well. I mean, of all debates, not just presidential debates. But here we had a candidate incapable of answering a question, incapable of following rules, and incapable of not making stuff up on the fly just to attack his opponent. The opponent didn't handle it very well either. And more than once, got into a shout fest or a slug fest back and forth. It was an embarrassment on a world scale. So that, I guess, is the big takeaway, is that first debate was an absolute embarrassment, I think, for everybody. They were much more civil and presidential, both of them, on the second debate, because the reviews, not just on President Clinton, but also for Joe Biden, were not glowing. People didn't like what they saw. They were not going to watch another debate. They didn't see a point to another debate. So they learned from that and brought a much better game to the second debate. But there were no moments like that I think we walked away from in the campaign. There was no, one of the big moments, I think, for John McCain is when a woman in a town hall started going off on President Obama about he's a Muslim and he's a terrorist and he's this and that. And John McCain stopped and said, "He is a good American. He is a good family man. He is a good man. We just disagree on policy." That defined John McCain's character in that debate. And I think it got him a lot of votes. Not enough, but I think it got him a lot of votes because he established that this isn't a hate fest. It's a policy discussion. And I think people wanted to hear that. So we didn't have that in this campaign. Any of those seminal moments or those takeaways that I remember years later.
Right. No, I think that's an excellent point. And as soon as you said defining moments, what did my mind immediately go to? It went to John McCain, and it went to that Bill Clinton thing, and expected George Bush looking at his watch when
Oh yeah, that was good.
when he was talking. Right. So that, I absolutely agree. I think that's a great point.
I mean, even 4 years ago, we had candidate Trump stalking Hillary Clinton from behind and getting into her frame and kind of doing this. That was really interesting, and it was somewhat defining.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my next question, I'm gonna just preface this with Democrats did not do as well in the election as expected. And so I'm wondering, did this surprise you in any way? If so, how did it surprise you?
It didn't surprise me. I don't think I was expecting a blue wave or a retaking of the Senate. And here's why. Overwhelmingly, Americans want to live in the middle. 70% of Americans polled want moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats. What they were given a choice of is radicals on both sides in some cases. There's plenty of moderates in there too. But I don't think this election was a repudiation of republicanism. It was a repudiation of Donald Trump's republicanism. But on a local level, plenty of successful Republican governors and Republican senators and congresspeople were able in their smaller races to either embrace the president if that was a good place to embrace, or distance themselves from the president if they could do that. I read a nice piece in the paper this morning. They were looking at how Latinos in Washington State voted. And we tend to, in Seattle in particular, think anybody who votes for Trump is X, fill in the descriptors here. But it's a lot more varied than that. Here we have a Latino man who said it hurt to hear the things that Trump was saying. But in general, he really appreciates the Republican message, which is self-sufficiency, social mobility, working hard pays off. He said, that's my family. My parents came here a generation ago, worked at every menial job they could get. So me and my family could go to school. We're all successful. We all own homes. We all own businesses. That's the American dream. I don't need anyone to give that to me. I need to be allowed to work for it. He said, I also understand the Democratic side because they seem to be more about equality and social parity and things of this nature. But that really hit me because here we have someone from an ethnicity that was attacked repeatedly. The other article next to it was more hate crimes in 2019 than ever. And they focused on the murder of several Latinos down on the south or close to the border last year. So here we have somebody that you would think, because of the rhetoric that we heard in the election and because of the rhetoric we hear as militias are mobilizing and things about immigrants and all this, that they should be on one side or the other, but there's so many more issues in it. There's so many more issues in it. And we did have a healthy economy going into it. And it's pretty tough to unseat the group that brought a healthy economy. And yeah, a lot of those gains went to the top, but average worker wage went up 12% too. So you have to recognize that there were gains all along the way. Black unemployment was at its lowest before COVID. So these are gains that people saw and connected it to the Republicans. Democrats will look at that and say, but they should be much bigger gains, that they're not good gains that are going to get repeated. And there's counter arguments to all those things. But no, I think there was enough things that affected enough people that it wasn't a repudiation of the Republicans. The other piece is, in general, we're in two tribes right now. You're this tribe or this tribe, and you can't change people's minds. What I was amazed at is 14% of registered Republicans that voted for Biden. It was 14 or 16. This is the Lincoln Republicans, and those that just said, I'm still a Republican, but boy, I want a different leader. So I'll live with Joe for 4 years and we'll run somebody better in 4 years. So I didn't think that, no, I wasn't surprised by it. Even in Washington State, there's a struggle. I mean, I think, I haven't looked at the totals for the legislature, but Republicans held their own in the fight for the legislature here. So.
Right, and Kim Wyman won another term as Secretary of State. We have the one Republican elected official on the West Coast right now. So
yeah, the single. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting for sure. So my next question is, so Trump is questioning the results of the election, which is really unprecedented. And there's so much to go into that in detail with that. But really what the question comes down to is how do you stay neutral or not stay neutral, or how do you deal with an issue like that as a history and government teacher?
So this is the question we get asked the most, is that I don't think I have to be political if I state the facts and allow you to come to conclusions. And I think there are those that would look at the curriculum we're dealing with right now and say, you know, Renoir is doing this way or that way. But I'm trying very hard to say it's unprecedented. The entire security apparatus of the United States said it was the most secure election in American history. And I challenge people to say, do you believe that story? Or do you believe the story of the camp where there is, and this is verifiable, this is a fact, this is in my opinion, 20,000 verifiable lies over the last 4 years. That's a staggering number, and every politician lies or obfuscates or anything. But to have quantifiable, verifiable, undisputable fact that says 20,000 lies were said from this side, and the security apparatus of the United States, including FBI, CIA, NSA, I'll say, this is the most secure election in American history. Which one am I going to believe? So that's up to you. Which one are you going to believe? But you present those facts. This is unprecedented. Nobody has ever done this. Closest we got in my memory was Al Gore in 2000, where there were verifiable irregularities in Florida, from the hanging Chad to preventing African Americans in neighborhoods from getting to polling places and then closing them with a line of 100 people out the door. Right. There were real irregularities there. We had the Secretary of State also in charge of the Bush for President campaign. I think there's a real conflict there that we should examine. But Al Gore accepted the decision of the Supreme Court because they're the Supreme Court and there's nowhere else to go. And in his speech where he said, his concession speech, he said, I don't agree with this. Florida needs to be counted again. However, we're a nation of laws. So I concede. That's what should be happening. When you've got every day 20 more lawsuits being thrown out for having no merit, at some point you have to stop that. So I don't know that if it was a Republican or a Democrat, I keep trying to bring things to you and say that they are unprecedented, to say that they are not normal. And we shouldn't accept abnormal as normal. This shouldn't be as what we expect from our leaders. So is it possible to keep all bias out? Probably not. But I'm also trying to limit by telling you what is verifiable and letting you talk about it, as opposed to here's my opinion on what's going on. You know, I might have an opinion that says, of course they stole this election. Look at this, and look at this. You know, there's got to be something there. Or I might have an opinion that says he's just repeating stuff and going after the big lie. You say it enough, people believe it. Mm-hmm. But I think it's totally valid to look at propaganda techniques as we're looking at in class and seeing where they're applied. We have verifiable fact that this was the most secure election. If you keep saying that it wasn't, let's look at the communication there and what does it mean. So I totally expect that I am imperfect in this, but you do try to just, I mean, the story tells itself and you just have to, and even in little assignments, you know, we keep asking, okay, what's the source and what's their bias? What's the source, what's their bias? So that you go into this information with a little bit of arming, and looking at the propaganda and how we communicate politically also will help arm you when you're looking at the arguments from both sides. So
exactly. No, I think that's a really good point.
So I think you know, I haven't talked to many of my fellow teachers about this particular election because we just don't have that one-on-one time that we do when we're in the building together. So I'm not sure how they're handling it, but I know that the discussions are happening certainly, and that you know, we're looking at it. but I've had teachers say, no, I won't teach government because I can't be unbiased.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, that's fair. If you are a highly charged political being, and this isn't for you, then that's okay. You can teach other things brilliantly. But we've had people say, this is not for me because I don't know that I could keep my politics out of the discussions. So, because we're all humans and stuff.
Right.
Right. So Mario, can you help me clarify what you meant in this question?
Yeah.
You wrote it. I'm just gonna say it, but you follow up. So is there any one particular race in which the results surprise you?
And I don't mean race as in origin. I mean race as in election. So was there any state that surprised you or any local race that surprised you in particular?
The trend was there for Arizona, but it did surprise me. And I'll say the same thing for Georgia. These are long-standing red strongholds, but to flip Arizona is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think Arizona flipping was as much a tribute to John McCain as it was a support for Joe Biden.
Right.
McCain was very popular there. He served for a very long time. And the disrespect that he received in his conflict with the president, I think people felt very personally there. And his wife took to the campaign stage and said, listen, he and Joe Biden were great friends, even though they opposed each other their whole careers. They had respect for each other. That wasn't true of my husband and the president. And I think that had an effect. So Arizona was a surprise. I half thought Texas was going to go.
Really?
I know that's a big lift, but I mean, what is normal right now? So,
fair point.
And you wonder if, and a lot of it had to do with so much of the, and I'll use this term in kind of a factual way, the voter suppression that happened when you remove several hundred ballot boxes and people have to drive 100 miles to vote. I was thinking that would change some people's minds. Say, wow, my own government is making me drive 100 miles to put this in a ballot box when I could have gone down the block. Now that was blocked and it never actually happened. But the fact that it was tried to happen there was a very obvious ploy to make it tougher to vote.
Right.
And it's an age-old strategy. So you recognize it when you see it. But I thought that might change some people's opinions, saying, is my party really doing the right thing? Or are we trying to win by trickery? So those people that were more of a moderate Republican, I thought might drift over to the Biden camp, and some did. He came closer, I think, than many have. So right. I thought there was a chance there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I think you could say Arizona was John McCain and Georgia was John Lewis. You know, you got that.
Yeah.
You have that parallel going there of those two deceased heroes of the country and their kind of impact on the race.
Yes. And Mary, you can remind, I forget her name. She ran for governor.
Stacey Abrams.
Yes. She worked harder than anybody.
Yeah.
To get the vote out in Georgia. She changed the landscape of voting in Georgia. Absolutely. So that's another thing that happened that was, I won't say unprecedented, but it was spectacular. The effort there was very uncommon. So that certainly helped Mr. Biden in that regard.
Absolutely.
Right. Definitely so many differences this year, this presidential race than any other years. That's for sure. So this is a question that you kind of addressed a little bit earlier, but I'm wondering if you have anything else to add. The question is, do you think that the results of the election were affected by the pandemic in any way? And if so, what do you think these effects were?
I think it had a huge effect. I gave this one a lot of thought because I don't want to give one person's victory because there was a pandemic. But what this did in a way. So if say there was no pandemic, we went into normal campaign mode, Biden would have been going across having his big rallies. Trump would have been going around having his big rallies. It would have laid down into the economy more than anything. That would be what they ran on. And Trump's economy is solid pre-pandemic. Now, what I also have to throw in there, it's solid because he inherited a solid economy from Obama Biden. When pundits say, we suffered economically during the Obama year, the data does not support that. The data says that they inherited the worst economy since 1932 or 1928, and they progressively fixed it. Now, that was a time when I was doing my education consulting thing with the Fed, so I got to see a lot of these mechanisms in person. How they did the toxic asset buyback, and how they paid those down, and how they worked on those things to bring the economy back alive. And there were some really unprecedented things that Obama and Biden did to bring the economy back, some of which were huge gambles. Quantitative easing was a bit of a gamble, but it worked out. They were counting on, as they added debt, that the economy would rise enough to meet the debt so there wouldn't be debt, and that tended to work. And there was no inflation, which was also the big fear, that if we create more capital, more money to put in the economy, we get a massive inflation. And at one point, they are actually worried about deflation, which is a whole different worry. So it all worked. And I got the opportunity to sit at the big table in the board of governors at the Fed with then Director Ben Bernanke, and he was explaining the strategy. And he said it was a gamble, but it was a gamble based on good math and knowledge of how people think. So it would have been on the economy that Biden would have tried to sell, we saved the country, Obama and I, and saved the economy. He made that argument during one of the debates. I don't think it would have been as compelling, because Trump's been saying for 4 years to people, I inherited a disaster. We've got more growth than we've ever seen, and look at the stock market. Now, some of those indicators are better under Trump. So he would have had a stronger argument probably there. What the pandemic revealed was really some governing by spite, because again, this is verifiable. A lot of moves were made to erase Obama and his presidency. A lot of executive orders were made. So the apparatus that was left behind after we dealt with the H1N1 virus was dismantled. Our people in China were called home. So all those things as cost cutting were dismantled. So we were left with empty shelves when COVID hit. We were left with no PPE when COVID hit. That probably shouldn't have happened. But in an effort to save money and kind of erase some stuff that, or from the Obama era, those things were shut down, and we were caught without any resources. And then from that point on, you've got the president knew about it in January and said nothing and took no action. You've got the whole, there's never been a real plan from the federal government. Pieces. I mean, he did some things well, but not nearly enough, and it wasn't a coherent plan. And finally, the conflict between science and politics. That shouldn't happen in a pandemic, and that reveals something about the administration that the American people, enough of them anyhow, said, I can't have that. It's revealing a weakness in the way we're being governed, that you should follow science and make policy based on that, as opposed to if you wear a mask, you're a Democrat and you got to get out. It was a loyalty test in the White House sometimes. If you wore a mask, you were taunted by the others because what are you afraid of? Because we said this was going away, and that's our official stance on it.
Right.
So I think as he doubled down on it's going to go away and don't listen to the scientists, people changed their opinion about the level of governance that was happening in the nation. So Yeah, I think he would have had a very, very strong shot of winning had the pandemic not turned that 14% of Republicans to vote for Joe Biden.
Right. I know. I think that's a great point. So, Mr. Renoir, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to have you on our podcast.
Always a pleasure, gentlemen.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Stick around, folks. We will be right back. The panel's next.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Bye.
Hello and welcome back to Taro. So for our final segment, our panel segment, we have 3 teachers from our school, Nathan Hale. So if each of you guys could introduce yourselves, that would be great.
I'll go, I guess. I'm Miss Ewell, Erica Ewell. I teach choir at Hale, and I'm here with Kirby, my dog.
I'll go next. Oh,
Okay.
sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. I'm Larry Ullman. I've been teaching at Hale for about 21 years, and mostly humanities, English, and a few other things here and there over the years. And I'm excited to be here.
And I am Jed Zoots, and I teach math at Nathan Hale. This is my 9th year, and I am also really excited to be here with these guys.
Thank you so much. We are very excited to have you guys on our podcast today. So today's topic that we will kind of just like freely discuss is basically mental health, specifically regarding the pandemic and online school. So first, I just kind of want to start off by getting a sense of what mental health means to all of you guys. So my first question is, what does being mentally healthy mean to you? And then from there, how have you stayed mentally healthy throughout quarantine and also the first couple months of online school?
Anyone could go ahead and start with what they'd like to say on that.
Well, I'll start, I guess. I mean, I'll try to keep it. I'm really interested in hearing what Ms. Ewell and Mr. Zoot say, but I'll just throw something out there. I think I'm a little bit older, here in comparison to everybody else. And so just a quick thought is mental health was not really openly talked about when I was a young person. I mean, I don't ever remember getting into a conversation about mental health that seemed like open to, sort of a real authentic sharing. And so I actually just was reading, I got a copy of the Seattle Times yesterday because I need the paper to clean a brush that I was using to put some oil stain on a fence. And, I know it's a crazy reason to buy the paper, right? People don't do this, buy the paper much anymore, but I used to get the paper a lot. And anyway, I was reading it before I used it, and got to the section where the advice column, and there was a person who wrote in and said that they were struggling with mental health. They're a young person, maybe like 20 something, and that they overheard at a family gathering, their parents and aunt using the expression "the loony bin," like, so and so went sent to the loony bin, and I didn't. It was hard for me to hear this because like I've used that so many times and that was used so much around me, and I never thought about it. But for this young person, that was really like a hard thing to hear her, I think, his parents talking this way. And so that really stopped me in my own tracks just this, like last night as I was reading this, like how many times have I kind of not either acknowledged it in myself or for other people and I think I'm not trying to blame it on this, but I do think that there's just a much better awareness for these sorts of issues today. And I'd love to, maybe I'll shut up here and I'd love to hear what Ms. Ewell and Mr. Zoots have to say about that topic.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think for me, my understanding of mental health has to do with the ability to like be present in any given moment. I don't think that there's one particular like way of being and living and moving through this world that is correct, or that is like the right and healthy way for everybody. Like, I think balanced and good mental health can kind of run the full gambit of emotion and reaction and ways to be. But I think at the core of all of that is like, as long as you are present and in control of those emotions and not letting them overrun you, then it should be, that's healthy to me.
So for me, mental health comes down to like considering your emotions, considering your stress levels, and taking care of yourself. And so for me, staying mentally healthy, oh man, it's tough, especially during the first few months. I know that there was a lot of stress last spring of just like, what will school look like? What will my job look like? And then we had a little bit of reprieve during the summer. And so my family, we tried to spend, quality time together. We tried to be active. We went for a lot of like little hikes, and taking care of ourselves in that way. But then also I think that for mental health, you can also take care and listen to others. And I think that does a lot for you. So something that I've done, Thanksgiving looked different for me this year, right? Because I love to host, I love to have people in my house, and we couldn't do that. So some of my friends that I've known since kindergarten, we got on a Zoom Friendsgiving, and just like seeing people that I love and care about went a long way during this time.
Nice. All right. So, as we've all probably experienced during this time, I think that we know that too much stress like heavily affects mental health. So, in a negative way. And in general, how would you all cope with stress, and how have you been coping with stress over the past couple of months?
It's tough. It's really hard because every day it's something new. Like it seems like there's very rarely reprieve from these things, and then it's just like adding on to the pile, whether it's school or life or just like just things happen. Like the check engine thing came on in my car the other day, and I was like, oh God, add it to the list. Like, I don't have time to deal with that. And it's just, it just comes at you and comes at you and comes at you. So I think I definitely have like a tendency to just like shut down, which is not great, and something that I definitely am working on. But I think a lot of students are in that boat too, when it's just like, I see this list of things in front of me that I know I need to do. And it's like, sometimes I even like, it's an easy thing where it's just like, okay, I got to come home and make dinner. I can do that. But then I get into the kitchen and I open the fridge and I'm like, I can't. It's just too much. So I have been really trying to like hold myself accountable to like small tasks, like, okay, what can I get done in a day? And just like checking off even a few things. And really working to maintain some kind of consistency in my day, like having a bedtime and like an evening routine that is like stays somewhat consistent, and a morning routine that stays somewhat consistent. It's not always possible because life happens and things come up and your routines get interrupted. But that's something for sure that helps me maintain stress level. Just like, okay, if I know that I have this routine set, or if I have like a specific time of the day where I work on these things, or where I get this schoolwork done or whatever, that's been helpful. And then for me also, music is a big stress reliever. I started playing piano much more consistently during quarantine, and started taking guitar lessons over the summer, which was fun. So like learning a new skill and just like putting pent up energy into like that, as opposed to just like sitting and scrolling, finding something productive to do at that time has been helpful.
So for my family, coping with stress, we both have been dealing with some health issues. So we found out that we have to be more active. So I'm going for jogs, which I used to do cross country, so I love running. And we're going for long walks. Whenever I get a break from teaching, I'm outside as much as possible. I love comedy shows. I love watching just things that make me laugh. And I feel like I used to like dramas, but my life is too dramatic right now as it is. So I have to get away from that and just watch things that I'll laugh at. Miss Ewell mentioned keeping routines. That's so important. So we were staying up way too late and then not sleeping well. So now I have to like get up early enough to make a good breakfast, to shower, to put on a button-up shirt, even though I'm wearing pajamas at the bottom. Like I look nice up here, and it makes me feel like I'm ready for the day and everything that comes with it. We are doing like a 30-day yoga thing just to like try to keep us going. So those are some of the ways that we're coping with stress. And then just like I mentioned earlier, like talking with people when we need, and finding little successes in each of our days, because the lists are never ending. And so I have to be willing to let go of some of that and be okay with what I can do.
I know it's Mr. Ullman's turn, but I just wanted to comment on the power of getting up and getting dressed in the morning. I wish more students understood that power, like, because I think there are a lot of kids who are like logging into classes like from bed, which like I get it, I probably would too, but like the separation of like, okay, this is my bedroom space and I'm in my pajamas and it's like sleepy time, as opposed to, okay, I'm awake and I'm a functioning person and I'm wearing an outfit that I would wear out of the house, can make a huge difference just in like your ability to like switch gears, you know, for you know, professional or school time.
Again, it's interesting to hear my colleagues speak there, my younger colleagues speak there, and I mention that again because I feel like in some ways I didn't answer the question, but there's something in the way I answer the question, and I kind of want to touch on this a little bit. I still think that for me, mental health is kind of like a factual, objective thing that I don't fully like have a kind of a personal relationship to. Like in other words, I acknowledge that it is a very important part of a human's life to attend to this, but it just was not something that was, I can't emphasize this enough, it just was not talked about in a way. I'm going to tell you a quick story. My mother, you know, had her share of mental health issues, including some things with my father that, and I'm not going to get into details, but you could maybe, you know, go to some of the places there. And anyway, she, this was in the late 70s, and she felt the need to talk to a therapist, and she didn't want my father to know. So this is before cell phones. So this is kind of sad. I mean, she went to a payphone because my father was notorious for checking that used to get phone bills and it would tell you where every call was. And so she didn't want him to see that she had called a therapist and asked questions because she was afraid that he would, you know, like, I don't know what, I mean, he wasn't physically abusive, but she was afraid that like it would be called into question. So that's, you know, I'm trying to give you the context that I grew up in. This is just not normative to talk about these things. A more personal example for me is, and I've been talking with some people about this, and I really want to make sure I'm doing this in a non-flippant way because I mean it sincerely, but I sometimes I feel like people are like, well, you're just saying that. But I'm fairly certain that I have attention deficit disorder, and probably like somewhat of a significant case of it. I've learned how to be high functioning with it, but I can see places that it continues to affect me. And it's not like it's not like a weep for Larry kind of thing. It's more like it's actually prevented me from maybe giving as much as I want to give to people and to things. And it's a lot of complexity, but I think that is an example of a mental health issue that I wish I could have known about and sort of addressed as a younger person. So a couple other things that are just coming up here are, you know, I have done a lot of therapy in my life, and I actually have been on some antidepressants for a while. I didn't like the impact that they had on me, and so I decided to not do those. And a lot of what Ms. Ewell and Mr. Zutz have said are true for me as well. Music, I see you, Erica, you have your dog there. I think animals can be therapeutic. What Mr. Zutz said about exercise, being outside are really important to me as well. I've worked on some performance things in my sporting life, and that's helped. And I wanted to draw a distinction between, like, let's say, reactive and proactive. I think a lot of times when I think about mental health, I see it's like a reactive thing for a lot of us. Like we're feeling unhealthy and we're like trying to, but I think it's also really important to build like yoga is a good example, like things in our life that are like not keeping us healthy, but like building our health. Like, it's a proactive thing. So I like working on things that help me there. And then last thought was that COVID for me is actually, I understand the privilege in it because I have a job, and if I did not have a job, it would significantly affect my mental health. And so I have to start by saying I'm privileged and grateful for having a job. And my wife has her job as well, and so we're secure there. But just my story is that COVID has actually been, and I think it's related to the ADD, but it's actually been less stressful for me. I enjoy being at home and like having fewer things to do and not as many engine check lights, metaphorically to deal with. And so that's just part of my truth that I want to share.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Really insightful. I think people will be able to get a lot out of this. So our next question here, the lines between school life and home life have really been blurred. And I know they've been blurred for me as well. I know I've tried to cope with this personally by having 2 separate desks, a week desk and a weekend desk, just to try to keep those school and home life stuff separate. What ways have you guys been able to cope with having that school life and home life separate, and what strategies have you all been using?
Oh my gosh, it is so hard. My wife and I had conversations about this last spring of just like, what is this going to look like for us? And how do because I have a 2.5-year-old, how do I keep my family a priority when my work doesn't seem to stop? And some things that we had to do was kind of say, okay, these are the hours that I'm going to be in front of my laptop. And during the week, are there moments where I can come out? So I know there's clubs at lunch, and I really want to go and be part of clubs. I've always done that in the 9 years I've been at Hale. But lunch is like when my son goes down for a nap. And so I leave my computer and I don't go to clubs because I want to go read him some stories and sing some songs with him during the middle of the day. And so I have to like figure out that balance. And then in the evenings, like after my last class, I say, I'm going to be off my computer at this time. I'm going to have dinner with my family. I'm going to make dinner. Or some days we're like, we are not going to do dishes. We're going to get something to go, right? Because I can't just add that one more thing. And so we do that. We have figured out like holidays. We put up our Christmas lights on November 2nd. Because we just needed some light in our house. I know that sounds crazy, super early, but just like figuring out nice, Miss Yule, how do we do that? The last thing I'd say is like I'm so lucky that I have like a separate room office, and during the weekends I don't come in here at all. Like I don't blur that. Of course, I have grading to do. Of course, I have lesson planning to do. And so while I'm watching my comedy shows or whatever, I'll work a little bit here and there in the evenings. But for the most part, it's like, here are my work hours, here are my home hours. And I've got to prioritize myself and my family as well.
I just got to say that I am so in awe of teachers who are doing this year who have children, because I don't know how, I don't know how you're doing it. It's so impressive and amazing to me. I have no intention of ever having kids, but I just, incredible. I've had many moments this year where I have thought, what would I do if I had a baby right now? What would, because one thing would suffer, either the baby would suffer or my work would suffer. And obviously the thing to prioritize there is the baby. So I I don't know how y'all are doing it, and it's really like hats off to you. Yeah, ask Mr. Heald, exactly. For me, my situation is a little bit strange too, because when everything shut down and quarantine began last March, I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment with my partner that had we don't have an office. We don't have like there's one door, well, 2 doors, the bathroom door and the bedroom door, and that's it. And my partner works overnights. He works at Seattle Children's Hospital in the 24-hour pharmacy. So he sleeps all day and works at night. So our schedules are opposite. So I can't be, in a 1-bedroom apartment where there's one thin wall between the living room, which is now also my office, and the bedroom where there's a person sleeping all day. I can't be making noise. So that was hard to balance at first. At least last year we had the grace of like, not a whole lot is being expected of you. This is emergency. Like nobody really knows what's going on. So we were able to take it pretty easy. And then over the summer we moved into a bigger place, and now my kitchen has become the office. And but yeah, this year I've had I don't know if I would call it a luxury, but I've had the option at least to go into the building to do my work. So I've been able to separate, like when I'm at school, I am working, and when I'm home, I don't do any, I don't bring my work laptop home with me at all. So like, even if I wanted to grade stuff, I can't, because I'm at home and it's home time and that's what I'm doing. And it just helps to like have that designated space that is like, this is where I am doing the work. Though it's tough sometimes, because I teach music, and my desk is literally a piano, and I've got my guitars sitting there, and there's like a really cool drum kit all over there and all these like fun distractions. So it's sometimes, I'll spend my prep just like singing songs, but I think that's a de-stressor too. So I feel like it's valid. But yeah, the separation of like, this is the place where I go to work, this is the place where I am home and not thinking about work, has been really important for me.
This is going to continue the theme of me feeling like the Lord Byron of this panel. Byron is considered one of the English romantic poets, but he's really an anti-romanticist in a lot of ways. Like his work, it's like a reaction to romanticism. And I don't mean that in a, like, I am reacting to what the other panelists have said. The point I wanted to get to though is that, and it kind of swirls back to what I'm talking about with ADD. And I want to really just reiterate that I haven't explored my ADD. Like it's self-diagnosed. I have not like gotten an official diagnosis. It's just there are a lot of signs, and there's some other people in my life who suggest this might be true, and it kind of makes sense. So, in terms of separating work life and home life, this is going to sound a little bit strange at first, but I'm actually separating them less, and that's actually good. And let me explain what I mean by that. When I'm in the building and there are a lot of students and colleagues who need things, I can get overwhelmed, and I think it's related to the attention deficit. Like in other words, when there's a lot of people and activities swirling around me, it's very hard for me to sort of like focus on the needs of people that I want to, work with and work for. And so I end up feeling like I need to get out of there and go someplace else, and I kind of need this separation. But when I've been working from home, I've actually felt that like I can, for example, this is not unusual for me to have a conversation with a student at like 8 o'clock at night, and I don't feel burdened by it. Whereas if I had been in the building all day, I would be so fatigued from sort of like just the amount of energy that I'm sort of sifting through that there was no way in heck that I wanted to do any more work when I got home. I also think there might be I'm thinking as I'm hearing Mr. Zutz and Ms. Ewell talk, that there's probably a stage of life thing. I mean, I have a college-age daughter, not that there aren't issues sometimes that come up, but and then a sophomore. So that's different than Mr. Zutz has younger children. And Ms. Ewell, you're dealing like we don't have a hugely large. We do have spaces that are easier for us to move into, and we purchased each of my wife has been working from home for a long time, so she's already navigated what this is like pre-COVID, and she right away last spring identified when I was in the family, space. She was like, "You need to get your own space. This is not going to work for me," and that was good. I'm glad that she said that. So we created a little space for me in one of our other rooms, and I actually got a desk identical to hers. That's kind of you can move it up and down a little bit, and so that kind of works for us. And it's really, Ms. Yule, I remember being in small apartments with Renee, and our kids, by the way. We lived in apartments for a while when the kids were young. And so that's a stressor. And I know some of our students are dealing with that stress. So I think some of these issues are more stressful for people depending on what kind of spaces you're dealing with. I'm maybe in a place where I can start being more of the teacher that I would like to be, which is really trying to serve as many students' needs as possible. And I think that there have been many times in my life where I've, Mr. Zipf, I maybe correctly opted to put family first. I don't need to do that as much. And so like, this is actually, with the space I'm getting from being at home and the time of life I'm in, I'm actually not feeling too conflicted about home and work, that they're kind of blending in a way that's nice. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. So this next question is, what have you learned about mental health since you've become a teacher? So this can be, interpret it however you want, but like, I think it can be related to, as a teacher, like teaching students, or it can be just like, what have you learned in just past years since you've been a teacher?
I'll jump in and say something short just to switch the order up. I've learned a lot from Ms. Yule and Mr. Zutz today just in this meeting. I like to hear both of you talk about it. It's like, it's not a comfortable topic to talk about, like our to get too personal about mental health. So I'm not suggesting that that's the case for either of you, but you just, it's kind of, it seems the way you're, at least my impression of how you're talking about it is very normative for you to talk about it. And I feel like students honestly do a really good job of talking about these things. And I'm comparing that to like what I grew up with, which was not that. And so I feel like I have a lot to learn from my younger colleagues and my students about just being like having a healthy relationship to dealing with mental health, which that's a lot of health there. But so I appreciate being around people who are able to just kind of address these things more directly. I think our students are telling us that they're not doing well, not across the board. I mean, there's some people who are, but I think a lot of our students are really, really struggling, and that's changing. Again, I want to hear Ms. Yule and Mr. Zutz on this, but it's changing the way that I think about teaching pretty significantly. And this is not, Mr. Lynette used to say, when asked, what do you teach? And everybody else was saying, English, which is what I did earlier today, math, music. He would say, I teach people, students. So that's shifting for me.
So I'll try to be very quick with this. Things that I've learned about mental health. One, when I first started teaching, I didn't know the power of talking to people and going to like share what I needed to share. And my wife and I do that regularly. We started when we were dating. We definitely did it when we got engaged and throughout our marriage as well. We go together, and it's not like marriage counseling by any means. It's really going to what's called an active listener and just sharing what's on our mind or what are things that we're struggling with. And having that person listen to us is really powerful. I also would say that I have seen students that have had some really, they've got trauma in their lives. They've got things that they're dealing with that I've never had to. And I've also witnessed just when they have sought help or gotten someone to help them through that, I've seen them come out the other side in really profound and really positive ways. So I would stress that it's really great to find your resources or your outlets or people that you can hold on to and grow with.
Yeah, I'm only in my 3rd year of teaching. It's been a wild first 3 years, but I think in relation to mental health, I have learned sort of where my limits are in terms of, or I guess I'm still sort of learning where my limits are in terms of like what I'm really able to take on and be present with. I have historically been a person who just says yes to like, because I want to do all the things. Like I want to be involved in everything. Like I get excited about, people's projects and ideas and passions, and I want to like be a part of stuff. But then it becomes like, oh no, I've signed on to everything. Whoops, I cannot be present at everything. So these first few years I have been learning like how to manage what's on my plate and make it possible to be present with all of those things, which a lot of that is just saying no to some things, or to, put some things on the back burner, or to say, we're going to do that later. And sometimes that's hard. And I know it's tough for students too, because, you're in your 6 classes. For 2 of you here, you're in 7 classes. And this stuff is just sort of put on your plate, and you don't have often the opportunity to say no. So I think as teachers, it's important that we are reflecting on like, okay, what is reasonable, what is manageable for our students right now? Like especially right now, always, but especially right now, what do I actually need to be putting on their plates in order for them to get what they need to get out of this class without overwhelming and overloading them? And I know that there are some teachers who are doing that and who are actively thinking about that and who are actively checking in with students about like, hey, is this too much? Because if it's too much, we can pause. I try to do that. And then I know that there are other teachers who are like, we just got to get through it. So, which, I get it. Like, I want to get through stuff too. But yeah, that's just, I don't know, that's what's been on my mind in terms of just like managing stress and managing sort of what's in front of me. Like, what can I say no to? What can I back off from? How can I, lighten loads for students? Or at the very least, like, what am I doing to support students if I'm going to put this on their plate? Like, how am I going to help them through it then? So that's what I'm working on.
All right. That's a great answer, all of you. Thank you guys so much. Just lastly, for the students out there who are struggling with this, what advice would you give them to cope and like deal with stress and, support their own mental health? And then additionally, just any last things any of you would like to add?
I would say to students, you are your own best advocate. If you need help, or if you are struggling, or if you whatever, you got to speak up for yourself, because otherwise we don't know. Like, suffering in silence isn't going to get you very far. If you need help, ask. Like, you will be surprised by how many people are ready and willing to rally around you. But we can't if we don't know that you need help. So speak up for yourself.
I can say something. I'll try to keep quick. That was great, Ms. Ewell. I think time-wise, just try to keep the same time there. I love what Mr. Zutz and Ms. Ewell just kind of reemphasized about talking. So speaking is really important, and like not just, it doesn't matter like what the words are. Just start the conversation. Something that one of the other thing I'll share is something from my performance work that could be useful. Is we talk about erecting a bubble. Like there are things that, like if you're approaching a sporting competition and you see the other team warming up or whatever, like that's not like, doesn't really help you to dwell too much on that, right? That's like a performance thing, but you could incorporate that into like more of a mental health context by really kind of, I think the work is internal, and that doesn't mean you're not talking to people about it, but that not everything, learning how to not let everything impact you, like that light on the car that goes on, like you're gonna have to deal with that at some point, but like there are some practices to like not immediately like letting your emotions, take that in. And it takes some time, but things like walking outside or just taking a break from your work or yoga can help, like not so much the content of what you're doing, but interrupting what otherwise would be like a negative pathway into like a bad mental place. So I'm just learning how to do that interrupting. I think I'll leave it at that.
All right. So very quickly, find little successes and wins every single day if you can, because those will help push you to do other things. Definitely seeking the help of others. And then I love what Miss Yule said, so I just want to reiterate it one more time. Saying no to things is something that I've learned is so important for me. I used to say yes to everything. So it's okay. It's okay to say no, and it's okay to seek help.
Thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you so much. This was wonderful. Thank you for all your insight and ideas. I think that's everything.
Yeah, it was great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. You can catch our next episode next month.
You have 2 minutes. What about you all?
It's a
It's
great.
been
On this topic, what are you thinking about?
Maria, what were you gonna say?
it's been hard for sure. It's been an adjustment. I just think trying to keep that home and school life as separate as possible is really key. I also moved recently. I moved from an 850 square foot house with 4 people to a house that's triple that size. And I've been able to keep what is my home life and what is my school life a lot more separate. And I just think that's helped my mental health tremendously.
Yeah, I think it's just like you guys said, so important to, have like that distinction between like when you're doing work and when you're doing stuff for yourself, and just having that distinction. And then also, it really stuck out to me what Miss Yule and Mr. Zutz, you guys said about having, about being able to say no to things and just like kind of manage what you can do and what maybe you can just, leave, and hopefully that will be beneficial, right?
For me, definitely getting enough sleep when I can is the biggest thing. And this thing is about to close down, so I just want to reiterate, thank you so much. This has been Taro, folks. We'll see you next month. Peace.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We pledge our full faith